Welcome to Taste Buds. I'm Deborah Eckerling, goal strategist, writer, and foodie. And today I'm speaking with Jamie Milne, recipe developer and the creator of Everything Delish. Welcome, Jamie.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Well, I am excited for you to be here. I mean, anybody who's got Delish in the title of what they do, I mean, they need to be on Taste Buds. Am I right?
I appreciate that. When I started 12 years ago, I had no idea where this was going when I picked Delish, but now I know that I ended up here, so it's really exciting.
It's very cool. So, what inspired Everything Delish? And I love that you grew to the name.
Thank you. It really started as a creative outlet for me. I was substitute teaching in Jewish schools here in Toronto, and I was that person because I went to Montreal for university. I went to McGill, and it has an amazing just food and hospitality scene. And I was that person that everyone would ask to for recommendations. And I was balancing, my seminar and my master's in substitute teaching, and my friends were just asking me, like, "Where should we go eat? What should we do? What should I make today?" And I was honestly very annoyed by all my friends constantly asking me for my recommendations. So I was just like, "You know what? I'm gonna post everything on an Instagram page, gonna call it Everything Delish, and you can all stop annoying me. You can just check out my Instagram page if you wanna know what I'm up to." And
Wow.
little did I know that it would end up where it is today, 12 years later.
Well, that is just proof that when you do something that makes your life better, inevitably, it makes other people's lives better. I think, that's a definition of disruption, right?
1,000,000%. I was gonna say that I think right now with social media, like, everyone's constantly trying to, chase that virality, but when I started 12 years ago, there was no such thing as an influencer. It was being a blogger, and there was no algorithm, and so I actually, started it for myself, rather than maybe, chasing, the amount of followers, and then it just organically grew, which was really amazing.
Well, one of the other podcasts I do, it's called Goal Chat. So, and we'll definitely have to have you on. But what I do is I bring together 3 guests, and unless it's on purpose, they don't know each other. But one topic that keeps coming up over and over again is the word authenticity. You
Yeah.
know, now the word is cringe, but that's really what you need to be, right?
For sure, 100%. I always say that that follow button is like currency. It's really important because the second that your audience feels that you're inauthentic or you're posting something that isn't true to yourself, they are going to hold that follow button to the highest standard and they're going to unfollow you. And that's why I really think that authenticity is everything, especially in, the days of social media, because we have to be transparent. And I think that people can just read through the screen. I always say.
And this is gonna sound like a counterintuitive question, but how do you stay authentic by trying to be authentic? Because that in and of itself feels like the challenge, right?
For sure. I think that the biggest thing is that from the get go, I've always made an effort to just showcase myself. And I always said no one can replicate me or my personality or my story. And so people that have been, OG followers, they know absolutely everything about my life. They know that if I posted that I didn't like a restaurant or I didn't like a certain food, and then years later I'm like, oh, hey, doing an ad for it, they would remember those types of things. I think that I really grew my audience from being my authentic self. And so everything I do is 100% accurate of what I'm loving, of what I'm doing. If I work with a brand or if I'm working, with a publication or something like that, it really has to be someone or, a brand or people that I really genuinely believe in and that I use. So, typically with my brand post, which is really great, is that I actually am organically already using the brand and they see it because I'm giving them organic love in my posts. And then they're able to come and like, hey, we really appreciate that. And I'm able to get brand partnerships through that type of way.
I just had a flashback. So years ago, I was emceeing a stage at yeah, I live in LA. We have festivals all the time, and I was emceeing a stage, and one of the guests didn't show, so we were talking about the food of one of the vendors, and we were just doing it because we were filling space, and the next
Right.
thing we knew, they brought us food. I mean, complete
Wow.
precursor to this, like 15 years
Right.
ago, but still. But you're absolutely right. When you're doing the things that you love, you attract the brands that you love.
100%. And a lot of what I do with everything Delish is a lot of storytelling. So I always say people come from the recipe or they come for the food, but they stay for the story. So I really like to share little tidbits of my life through voiceover. So I'll share everything, about like being Jewish and like, about a Rosh Hashanah recipe or a Shabbat and what it means to me. I'll talk about anxiety. I'll talk about fertility. I'll talk about endometriosis. I'll talk about, introducing myself just, to a new audience and just being like, hey, this is who I am. This is how I built my profile or my socials, and I really just talk about my journey in the most authentic way possible. And typically, when I do a storytelling, that's when my videos go viral and I gain, a lot of followers from that, which is amazing, just from being my authentic self.
Is there a line though? Is there anything you won't talk about?
I mean, I don't show my son's face on social media. That was just something that my husband and I kind of came to together. Just, that was something that like was very respectful of both of our boundaries. So like, but other than that, I mean, I talk about everything. Something that I'm really passionate about is endometriosis. I had endometriosis. And so and my husband and we talked about our fertility journey, with our son. It has zero to do with food, but also it has so much to do with food because when we were going through that and when I was recovering from my surgery, I posted about anti-inflammatory foods that were really helping me heal and helping me recover post surgery. And I was able to share an anti-inflammatory recipe and then talk about, my journey with endometriosis and fertility, which ultimately, led me to getting pregnant a year later with my son. And a lot of people, that video ended up going viral, over 1 million views, and I gained over 100,000 followers from it.
Well, I am a firm believer that when you have a story to tell that's gonna help others, and I don't wanna call it an obligation, but it's kind of an obligation, right? Because
Yeah.
you lived through it, and that way other people see that it's possible.
100%. And I really think that I want to inspire other people to be able to, pursue their dreams. And I want people to know that anyone can do what I'm doing. And I really, going back to being your authentic self, like I think that transparency is everything, authenticity is everything. I always say in my videos, when you do what you love, you will succeed because I wholeheartedly believe in that.
Amazing. Love it. See, I knew you were my people. So tell me, and this is another thing, it's really funny because I would hear this 10 years ago. Is it too late to go on social media? People are still
Never.
saying that. Can you believe that? In
I mean, listen,
2025?
if anything, listen, like in full transparency, social media is an extremely saturated space. So I don't think it is as easy necessarily to start. I think because you are just being, inundated with just so much content, like we're just consuming so much content. But I believe that if you're posting content that you love and that you are being your authentic self, like you're doing it for you, and if that's the reason, behind in your motivation to starting an account, then there's no reason why it can't take off.
That's really cool. And
Mhm.
important, right? Because, the balance. You need a strategy, but you also need to be doing it for internal reasons, not just, oh, I want to
100%.
be famous. I want to go viral. No, I want to share my story. People need this information. Let's see what happens, right?
Exactly. I agree 100%.
So, for someone who has not yet gotten started or has been even better, who's been doing it for a long time, but they're like stuck, what do you recommend? What are little adjustments they can make to get their message and themselves out there better more?
I honestly believe that storytelling is a really great way to differentiate yourself from, the millions of people that are posting daily. I think for me, I talk a lot about leaving my teaching career and pursuing, content creation at a time where it was not the norm. And I had a lot of people that didn't believe in me. I persevered through a lot of negativity, especially because content creation wasn't a thing 12 years ago. Like it was heard of. And so for me, um, I really just believe that, when you kind of cancel out the noise and you're being, again, we're going back to authenticity, but when you talk about your journey and kind of like what's led you and inspired you to be where you are today, I think that it really is like a great way to introduce yourself in a really authentic way to your followers or people that are going to find you, right? You have to think, why are people going to hit that follow button? And for me, I know people love the story and I know that they love the recipes. So that's why I really try and blend both. So I really think it's all about, trial and error, putting yourself out there, posting authentic content, and also being consistent. I don't think that you can just expect to post once a week or once every few weeks and expect that to go viral and then take off from there. I honestly think that being consistent and, being like setting those goals, I'm going to post 3 times a week and I'm going to share on my stories. And I'm one of those videos a week is going to be me talking to the camera and just like really kind of setting those goals for yourself and, treating it like, okay, like I'm gonna, I want to put some effort into this. I really think that will help you, grow your account as well.
Okay, so lesson 1, start 12 years ago. Lesson
Mhm.
2, be yourself. And lesson 3 is set goals, be consistent, be you.
For sure. But I also want to add that, 12 years ago, social media looked really different than it is now, and that every single year, every part of my journey, like I'm constantly pivoting, I'm constantly reinventing myself. And I've gone through so many different phases of everything delish. There has been, like a hospitality stage, and there's been this stage and this stage. And as my life evolves and as certain life events happen, I'm able to organically, intertwine them into my content. And so for me, even though I started 12 years ago, things really, really took off for me during the pandemic because I put myself out there through recipe videos. I taught myself how to make a recipe video. I was dabbling in it before, but not, 100% because prior to that, I was working with a lot of hospitality and like through the lens of food and tourism. And I wanted to travel the world rather than be at home and do recipes, even though I would sprinkle that in. But I genuinely love to cook. And then I was at home during the pandemic and, everything stopped. And I started TikTok and I started posting these recipe videos that I look at now. And I was like, I can't believe I would ever post something like this. Um, but that's why I went viral. And I knew from the get go that I wasn't going to do, the viral trending sound, but I was going to talk about who I was and I was going to talk about my journey. And one of my most viral recipes that gained me a lot of followers at TikTok at the beginning was talking about being really anxious about what's going on in the state of the world and using cooking as my outlet. All over burrata and roasted tomatoes.
Amazing. I love that. And I love that you answered the question I was going to ask you, which is how you went from restaurants to the cooking videos. And I think everybody had to pivot in one way, in one way or another, uh, in 2020 and beyond. And the landscape right now is completely different in part for that. Because, well, part of it, I think, is because we're comfortable. We have to be on camera.
100%. And I think that, as social media is consistently evolving, we're just, you have to be able to pivot. You need to be able to adjust and to, not necessarily, again, I don't believe in chasing virality and I don't believe like, necessarily going with the trends, but if, talking to the camera is something that's like doing really well, experimenting with that and seeing if it's for you, like why not? For me, like it's rather than just pivoting to those trends, I really try and incorporate things that are happening into my life and make it part of my content. So now, of course, being a mom, talking about that, we just have Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, talking about those types of recipes. I really try and be relevant to my own life and bring that into what I'm doing and posting.
And where did your love of food come from?
So, my love of food, I grew up in a Jewish household where Shabbat was frequently like you could not miss a Friday night dinner at my bubby's. And it was a Shabbat table that was always full of so many different guests that were just from friends to family to neighbors, and I think I just grew up from a really young age is of that food and cooking are really at the heart of the table, and they bring so many people together. My mom was an amazing cook, my sister is an amazing baker, and I was just filled with so many amazing, food influential people, like, in that sense in my life. And so for me, I was that really, like, I would say, like, I was that 4-year-old ordering a Clubhouse with, like, extra bacon, I'm sorry, and, mayo. And, like, I just genuinely was obsessed with food from a really early age. And I also did a lot of cooking with my bubby. So, like, she used to pickle her own peppers and make her own pickles, and those are some of my earliest and fondest memories. I remember her making strawberry jam together and really just showing that, you could take something so simple, but I don't know why, they just like, those recipes really stand out to me, um, and so it just really kind of kickstarted my love for food and hosting and hospitality.
And it sounds like Jewish and food go hand in hand for you, as they do for most of us, right?
For sure. My mom was constantly cooking. I would say, always having those, ear dog what are they called? Like, dog-eared cookbooks, like,
Yes.
splattered with food everywhere, out on the counter, the joy of cooking, so many different, like, cookbooks in that, like, I have now in my own possession. I also I always think about my mom and just how well she treated something like a Le Creuset Dutch oven. Like, that was a prize heirloom possession in the kitchen, and it's something that I'm so proud that my mom gave to me, and now I keep in such, amazing care. And it's just really amazing to see just, like, how small little influences from when I was young really have, like, shaped me into who I am today. Like, the all-clad stainless steel, like, that has just been in, my family for so long, and it's really crazy not crazy, but it's amazing and kinda beautiful to witness just how these traditions have been passed down and how I now, like, am doing these things, from, like, using the candlesticks of my great-grandmothers to the challah board, like, to serving, having an antique, platter on my bar cart, just, like, really kind of taking these traditions and these heirlooms that were passed down to me and kind of making them my own in my own house with my family now.
So it's the food, it's the ingredients, it's the love, but also the tools, right? The
For
pots,
sure.
the pans, the candlesticks, the history, all of it together, I think is that food love family Jewish thing.
And, growing up, my mom, she never measured. It's like my mom would just take handfuls of seasoning. And my mom, I love her to death, but she would have the craziest food combinations. She would eat like grilled pineapple with cinnamon sugar on it and then dip it in honey mustard. And at the time, I'd be like, that is so, and I don't want to use the word odd, but that is so interesting. And but it really helped shape me into the cook and the person I am today because I love blending these flavors that you wouldn't necessarily think of. And I feel like my mom has had so much influence on me because of that. She's always kind of pushing the boundaries when it comes to cooking and really just is like, hey, like, this is what I like. And I'm cooking from the heart. And hopefully you guys will like it too. And I feel like that's kind of what I'm doing with everything Delish. My recipes are ingredients and recipes and dishes that you will genuinely find in my house. I'm not cooking for the internet, I'm cooking for myself. So if I'm posting a salad or a chicken dish, you best bet that was probably my lunch or that was my family's dinner the night before. And so everything is just 100% me. And it's like my mom, everything was 100% her. You would find the craziest combinations, but it somehow worked.
So now I need an example from you. What I like to do is include a recipe because I don't think it's fair to make people hungry without giving them a
For
project.
sure. I agree. So, I mean, I recently posted my brisket, and my brisket is very different than my bubby's and my mom's because they use ketchup and Coke or ginger ale. I don't know. They have their own combination of ingredients, but I do more of a tomato sauce, and I use brown sugar, balsamic, and I love using a bunch of herbs. I love my mom's death if she is listening to this. She is like my mom's a very dried herb person, not fresh herbs. Um, and so I feel like that's common in a Jewish household. And so I'm like all about like the fresh rosemary, the bay leaves, the thyme. and we have very different briskets. She's always, like, "Your brisket is so different than mine," and I'm always like, "Your brisket is so different than mine." But my brisket is really just, influenced by her. It's a little different than hers. We don't use ketchup, but we use another tomato, base, and it's delicious. And it's something that, I actually make in my mom's Le Creuset Dutch oven. And it's become part of our like tradition for the last like for Rosh Hashanah and Passover and everything. I make I think I've made it for the last 5 years. And now everyone is asking me for my brisket.
Well, we always love a good brisket recipe. And if you go to jewishjournal.com/podcast, you will get that recipe and also read the article that goes with the episode. What other fun things can people do to um, liven up their cooking?
I really am a believer in fresh herbs. You will always find fresh herbs in my kitchen, in my fridge. The way that because a lot of the times why I feel like people are fearful of fresh herbs is because they do go bad, very quickly if you're not storing them properly. For me, I actually just take a Tupperware, fill it halfway with some room temperature water. I stick the herbs directly into the container, and then I actually cover it with saran wrap. Or you can leave it. We don't necessarily have to. I actually find that my herbs can actually last about 5 to 7 days longer with that method, and it looks like I have a garden in my fridge. It's really beautiful when you open it, and it's just a really nice way to, I think, just jazz up your food. I think that, you shouldn't be scared of fresh oregano. Fresh oregano is such a bright, flavorful herb that you can use with dried oregano. But I always, people are always asking me, like, I'm too nervous to use that. Like, why do I need to have that herb? And I'm like, once you try it, or once you garnish your food with it, or once you cook with it, you will love it.
That's amazing. I think my mom and I were the opposite in that she liked the fresh and I like the dried because dried's easier. I'm also a former non-cook who discovered a love of cooking like 10 years ago. Is there something you know now that you wish you knew when you first started Everything Delish?
Oh my goodness, that is a really good question. Um, Oh my goodness, that is making that there's not really many questions that make me stop in my track, and that is making me stop. Something that I wish I knew. I think that virality isn't everything. I think it's something that we really quickly at the beginning, when the pandemic happened and TikTok was a thing, we really believed in like kind of chasing those viral videos and those trends. But I actually believe more so that your content will go further and your community will grow more substantially and more meaningfully when you're actually posting non-viral trends. So, I hope that I answered that correctly.
The answer is perfect. And as someone who's been, I've been on LinkedIn for 20 years. I started my first blog 15 or so years ago. I started multiple podcasts. So, in each time I've done it, it's been a different season. It's really interesting to see the evolution,
Right.
especially since if you think about it, social media has been around like 17 years. I mean, okay, mainstream host MySpace social media,
Right.
17 years, you know, that's like graduating high school. That is not a long time in the span of things, and
Yeah.
to watch it continue to evolve is kind of fun and interesting
No,
as
I
well.
couldn't agree more, and I really see, with every new platform or kind of like new, I would say, not trend, but, we went from long form content to short form content to back to long form content, and so it's really just being able to adapt and just pivot in a way that makes most sense to you. Um, for me, I've never been a long form content type of gal. The vlogging, I dabbled in it. I couldn't do it. And so I don't really
I
have a YouTube
didn't.
presence. And that's okay, you know?
Yes, I think it's awesome. And my goal chat, it's an hour panel show. This is 20 minutes-ish. And I recently started a new podcast called Book Proposal Podcast because I do goals, but I also help people write books. And those are like 3 to 5 minutes.
Right.
And I'm like,
Wow.
But the point being, there's so many different fun things to play with
Yeah,
in social.
for
You can
sure.
just try it out until you find the things that feel
For sure.
authentic.
For sure. That's like with me in Substack. I never thought I would be into, like long form writing, but I actually really like it.
Amazing. This has been so much fun. Where can people find you? Where are all the
Well,
places?
you can find me, oh my goodness, everywhere. I have a website, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest. What else do I have? Substack. Did I say that yet already? I am wherever you are on social media, you can find me there. A lot of my recipes are written on my website, which I will pass the link on to you, and also on my Substack. And thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure speaking with you.
Uh, Fun for me too. And do you have any final food for thought?
Final food for thought. I said it earlier, and it's something that I just believe in, and I constantly tell my audience. But when you do what you love, you will succeed. I wholeheartedly believe in that. My passion has turned into my career, and I believe that if I can do it, anyone can, and it's never too late to start.
Wonderful. All things I believe in. And I just so love this conversation. Thank you so much, Jamie Mill, for joining me. Thank you for tuning into Taste Buds with Deb. Don't miss an episode. You can subscribe on YouTube, iTunes, and or your favorite podcast platform. And if you go to jewishjournal.com/podcast, you can read the article and get the recipes that go with each episode. I am so excited about the brisket. I'm going to have to try it.
You have to let me know. It has caramelized onion, something that my mom was not happy about, but it's worth it, the extra work.
You know, I am one of those people who I don't like raw onions, but give me onion rings or caramelized onions and I'm good.
I love it. So you will love this recipe.
Awesome. Okay, get the brisket recipe, read the article, and so much more. And you can learn more at tastebudswithdeb.com. Until next time, do what you love, including cooking and videos and whatever else. Um, and just be as you can, because that is the recipe for success. Until next time, bon appetit.